People of Reddit, when were you genuinely scared for your life?
When my ex-husband broke down the bathroom door and put a gun to my head and threatened to redecorate the bathroom with my blood and brains. It took almost a year to squirrel away enough money to leave. I haven't seen or heard from him in 25 years. I hope his life sucks. Edit, wow, didn't expect this response. To the women and men who have gone through this and escaped, I'm glad you made it out. To those still in their relationships, please leave as soon as you can. Make a plan. It will be hard, but so worth it. You don't have to be someone's punching bag. You are not worthless. They will never change. No matter how much you love them, they will not change.
I was going to say I feared for my life just about every day when I was with my ex.
I'm glad you survived to get out. I'd like to add that for anyone who might currently be in a relationship where their safety is threatened, your life is way more valuable than any of the things you may lose if you run away and start fresh. There are resources out there that may help if you don't have the money, family, or friends to help get you on your feet when you run away. Please run away and do not go back. Your abuser will apologize, will say, "But you promised, and I'll do better, I'll change." It's not true. It's just part of a wicked cycle that will only end with you dead. Don't let anyone guilt you and manipulate you into thinking your life is worthless or even just worth less than theirs.
My friend and I were eating burgers in a darkly lit area on a street in Seattle when a man walks straight up to us with his hands in his pockets, gesturing like he had a gun. He says, "Give me your money." I immediately pretended to be drunk and got all chummy with him and said, "If I had money, that would be amazing." And the guy looked around and then walked off. No idea if that was smart or incredibly stupid, but I definitely realized in that moment that when your mind is in fight or flight, you have little control over what your brain is going to do. Had a massive asthma attack as a paramedic myself. When your colleague looks you in the eye as he's sticking defib patches to your chest and radios for a 2-crew cardiac arrest backup, you know it's not good. Especially seeing as they can't use medical jargon around me as I already know it. So I know what a silent chest means. You're not moving any air. I know what it means when the nebulizers haven't worked and they start giving adrenaline. I know what the defib patches mean, and I know none of it's good. I remember passing out really, really slowly, and as I closed my eyes, I genuinely thought I was going to die and I'd never open them again. To come around in the ICU later with the same colleague by my side was the best feeling. He saved my life undoubtedly. Almost crashed in a helicopter when the pilot started to freak out. That's when I knew we were in trouble.
Just a silly anecdote, but I travel a lot for work. I'm well used to all the bumps, thuds, whines, groans, and shimmies a plane will make during the course of a flight. I'm usually immediately asleep as soon as I sit down. Occasionally, I get seated next to a nervous flyer, and my go-to method is, "Look, I fly a lot. If you don't see me nervous, you have nothing to worry about." One time, I was sound asleep having a nightmare next to one of these nervous flyers. I bolted awake and said, "Shit. That poor guy nearly died thinking the plane was about to crash." I lived on an artificial heart for 11 months. It was battery-driven, and at night I had to plug everything into the wall. The terror was real. I had a thick cord exiting my abdomen attached to a computer that controlled the pump inside my body. The computer failed on me twice, and I had to swap it out myself. When the computer unplugs, you have no blood flow. I had to experience this twice. Then I had a heart transplant that was far less terrifying than the artificial heart.
What does it feel like to have no blood flow?
It's happened to me twice. You suddenly feel a nothingness where there had been a constant rhythm that you never noticed before. I was sitting at my desk after just climbing the stairs. It was a bit like an elevator arriving on your floor, but then a dead calm. I shouted, "Hey," and put my hand over my heart and felt nothing. I freaked the F out and punched myself in the heart. Maybe that started it back up. Maybe my heart was just having a stutter and then kicked on by itself. 2 days later, at a cardiologist after being told it was impossible and I must have been mistaken, they stopped it again with some pill beneath my tongue. I flatlined and they had to do CPR to bring me back, and they apologized for saying I was wrong.
On a tour in some mountains in Scotland, a very nice guy was driving me up a mountain. It was icy as hell. All was going well until the car swiveled out of control and started to pendulum towards a tree. I genuinely thought that was it. Somehow the driver stopped, and we just about missed the tree, crashing into a ditch. He asked me not to mention it to his boss. I tell him to drive on.
Did you tell his boss?
I didn't. At the end of the day, he was an absolute legend and was just doing his job. If I told his boss, it would have been to request a raise for saving our lives. This reminds me of a field trip I took in college. We were going to a city that was like 6 hours away, and there were 2 or 3 teachers' aides and our professor each driving one of those big white vans. The teacher's aide who was driving the van could not stay awake. He repeatedly fell asleep at the wheel, even when we were in the city, like at stoplights. We, the students, basically took shifts sitting up front and making sure this dude stayed awake. When we told our professor, he just bought a bunch of 5-hour energy shots for him to drink. It was super terrifying.
When my oncologist stopped saying the growth and started calling it the cancer and followed up with, now I'm going to have to figure out how to save your life. Fortunately for me, he figured it out. I just love the special way doctors say in the most robot way. My dad has serious heart problems. One doctor I was talking to kind of clicked her tongue and said, yes, this is what we call the widowmaker. Thanks. That is really comforting.
When I was at an outdoor range with a few friends, and one guy, a few people down, had a misfire in his 7mm Magnum. He pulled the trigger, no bang. He then turns around, muzzle sweeps everyone to his right, including me. The guy behind him grabbed the gun, pointed it down at the dirt in front of Mr. Dumbass, and the round went off. No one got hurt, but me and a few other people sat down to take a break after that, and Mr. Dumbass was promptly escorted off the range by a rightfully so pissed off RO. Misfires are always nerve-wracking, and I've always been taught to hold it on target for 30 seconds before attempting to clear it, and always leave the muzzle pointed down range when you do. We were at a gun range with a friend for the first time ever, but before going, he grilled us about gun safety and the do's and don'ts. We had a Miss Dumbass beside us that boasted about having been there millions of times. She took a shot and missed the target with her 9mm Glock, turned around undignified to look at her friends, fingers still on the trigger, stopped, and muzzle pointed straight at my husband. The guy behind her was quick to lower her arm and point the muzzle down. She too got escorted out. We were new there, but damn, we had some damn common sense. The biggest danger with guns isn't just being new to them. It's becoming overly comfortable around them. Newbies are typically cautious because they're scared, but as people become more comfortable, they tend to lose respect for the danger that guns pose. I agree that not all gun enthusiasts become careless. As a gun owner myself, I always remind myself of safety protocols, and I know others who do the same.
I remember a time when I was a Boy Scout. We were backpacking in the Eagle Cap Wilderness area of eastern Oregon. We attempted to make it up Glacier Pass, but the trail was completely snowed out, even in July. We turned around and stopped at the first meadow we found to eat some lunch. About 15 minutes later, our scoutmaster calmly told us to stand up and put our backpacks on because we needed to leave. When I looked in the direction he was looking, I saw a very large cougar staring at us from across a shallow creek. We started down the trail, and I glanced back to see if the cougar had moved. To my surprise, the cat was crossing the creek and following us. We kept moving and periodically looked back to check on it. The cougar followed us for about 3 miles before we lost track of it. That night, we had a decent-sized campfire and 2 other older boys, and I stayed up most of the night keeping watch. The next morning, we found a freshly dead animal about 100 yards from our camp.
During Hurricane Harvey, my dad and I had to evacuate some people from Crosby. However, I-10 was shut down, so we had to take some back roads to get there. Along the way, we encountered a stretch of road where the water was about 4 feet deep for a good 5 miles. My dad's truck is quite large, and the water was almost reaching the top of the hood due to being pushed by the current. My dad, who had experienced war zones during his time in the Army, dropping off troops near an Iraqi mortar squad that was bombing our drops during the Gulf War, said his heart had never beaten as fast as it did in that moment.
When I was 11, I had a terrifying experience during surgery. Despite being under anesthesia, I was aware of everything happening. I could smell and feel everything, and I even hallucinated from the ketamine they gave me. I thought I was in hell and that the doctors had killed me. The full story is quite traumatic. I was told I would fall asleep and wake up after the surgery was over. However, during the procedure, I suddenly smelled blood and burning flesh. I could hear the doctors talking, but I was paralyzed by the anesthesia. I hallucinated ants crawling all over me and into my body. Then, I felt waves of pain as they sliced open my gum. The rest is blurry as I went in and out of awareness. I now have PTSD from the experience.
I'm currently dealing with a large kidney stone, and I may need surgery again. This news has triggered my PTSD, and I've been shaking all day. When I was 8 or 9, I went on a field trip to a water park. The wave pool was overcrowded, and during the bigger waves, I was pinned underwater by about 5 people landing on top of me. A lifeguard saw it and saved me, but the sensation of helplessness as I drowned is something I'll never forget.
A similar incident happened to me in high school at a wave pool. I became fatigued treading water in the crowded pool and eventually went under, surrounded by inner tubes. Someone must have seen me because I was suddenly hoisted up by my forearm above the water. When I surfaced, I looked around to thank my savior, but no one was facing me, and there were no lifeguards in sight. To this day, I have no idea who saved me, but they likely prevented me from drowning.
At 17, I had a terrifying experience while trying to take apart an old light fixture above my bed. I was certain I had unplugged it, but when I cut the wire, there was an incredibly powerful spark. Everything went white, and then the breaker for the second floor went off, plunging everything into darkness. I thought for sure I was dead. Thankfully, the wire cutters had rubber grips, but they were broken afterward, with the edge melted together from the electricity. It was a close call. During my first year of commercial fishing, jellyfish were raining down as we were stacking our gear back on the boat. A jellyfish tentacle got in my eye and across my face just as the boat started to lean heavily toward our fish haul, which was filled beyond capacity. With one eye open, the other crying, and fogged up glasses, I couldn't see a thing. I yelled at the captain that I couldn't see, but he kept yelling at me to pull down since there was a snag on the power block. All I could think was that I didn't want to go out blind into the ocean. Then there was the night my dad got so drunk and angry that he came at me with a kitchen knife. It happened during one of his food sprees when he forgets he's already eaten and accuses others of stealing from him. He thought someone took his chocolate and threatened to cut off their hands. My mom started crying, my brother ran off, and I had to handle the situation. I got everyone out of the way and talked him down from using the knife, but in the end, I had to choke him out to stop him. It's something that still bothers me 2 years later.
During a camping trip with friends in Vermont, I made a dangerous decision to mix a bunch of drugs. After about 8 hours, I lost control of my body and senses. I couldn't see, move, or feel anything, but I could hear. It was terrifying. I was convinced I was experiencing a drug overdose and was going to die. I felt incredibly foolish, imagining my obituary highlighting my poor choices. This state lasted for about 30 minutes, during which I was moving and tensing muscles randomly. Eventually, I started running uncontrollably until I collapsed. My friends held me down until I regained my senses.
Another frightening experience was during PE class in my sophomore year. My friends and I decided to play around with an empty shopping cart. I got on the front, facing my friend who pushed me at a high speed. When I let go, hoping to jump off safely, I fell hard, hitting my head. My vision blurred, hearing became muffled, and I felt lightheaded. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was only about a minute. Thankfully, there were no lasting effects.